If you've ever felt overwhelmed trying to figure out which plants are friends and which are foes, you're not alone. Companion planting is one of the most talked about topics in gardening and also one of the most misunderstood. In today's episode, we're breaking down what companion planting really is, what it's not, we'll bust a few myths, talk about which combos actually matter, and I'll share easy ways to use companion planting to attract beneficial insects, support soil health, and naturally manage pests, all without overcomplicating things. So whether you're growing in raised beds, containers, or an in-ground garden, this episode will help you understand how to use companion planting to your advantage without the stress or confusion. And if you're new here, welcome. I'm Audrey Crawford, a lifelong gardener from the Central Valley of California, and this is the Audrey's Little Farm Show, where I take the guesswork out of gardening and help you grow a successful garden one simple step at a time. All right, let's jump in. So you've probably seen those colorful companion planting charts. You know, the ones where tomatoes love basil, beans hate onions, and so on. And while some of those suggestions can be helpful, most of them are based more on tradition or anecdotal evidence than actual science. Because the truth is, most garden plants aren't dramatically helping or hurting each other just by being neighbors. You aren't going to ruin your harvest just because you planted carrots next to peppers or because you put basil in the so-called wrong spot. What really matters and where companion planting shines is in how it supports the overall garden environment. So let's talk about what companion planting actually does well. When you plant a variety of crops close together, especially different plant families, you start to build a more diverse and balanced ecosystem in your garden. And that brings a few big benefits. First is that you attract a wider range of beneficial insects like pollinators, ladybugs, lacewings, and hoverflies, which all help naturally keep pest populations in check. Certain herbs and flowers like basil, marigolds, and thyme can help repel pests or distract them from your main crops. And then underground, when you have a mix of plants from different families, that attracts a wide variety of soil microbes, and that diversity supports long-term soil health and resilience. So instead of getting caught up in rigid pairings, I recommend focusing on strategies like mixing different plant families. The more plant families in close proximity, the better. You can pair deep-rooted with shallow-rooted crops, and you should also add lots of herbs and flowers into your veggie beds. Keeping your garden environment active and diverse above and below the soil is the very best thing you can do. Because companion planting isn't magic, but when it's done with thought, it really can help your garden become more pest resistant, balanced, and productive. And now, while most plant pairings are not harmful, there are a few combinations that are either problematic or just not ideal, so let's look at a few of those ones that come up most often. And the first is beans and alliums. This one gets repeated a lot. I see it all the time, and that is that beans shouldn't be planted near onions or garlic. The idea is that the alliums might interfere with nitrogen-fixing bacteria in beans, but so far, there's no solid research to prove this. In real home gardens, they can grow just fine together if they're spaced well and cared for properly. The next bad combo is fennel and basically everything. So this one's pretty accurate. Fennel releases compounds that can inhibit the growth of nearby plants, and gardeners have seen this consistently. So fennel is best grown in its own place, separate from your veggies. The next bad companion is black walnut trees. So they release a compound that's toxic to many plants, especially tomatoes, peppers, and potatoes. Thankfully, it's likely that most of us aren't planting our veggies near black walnut trees, but it's a good one to know. And then the next bad companion is potatoes, tomatoes, and cucumbers. So these crops are all susceptible to blight and similar fungal issues. So it's not that they necessarily harm each other directly, but planting them close together can make it easier for the disease to spread. That said, blight isn't something you can solve just by separating crops by a few feet. Late blight, for example, spreads through airborne spores and water splashes, and under the right conditions, it can travel dozens of feet, if not miles by the wind. So whether your tomatoes are in the same bed as your cucumbers or 20 feet away, they're still potentially at risk. So I think one of the biggest mistakes we make in gardening, especially with topics like companion planting, is just overcomplicating it. You do not need to memorize a huge list of good and bad pairings. What you need is a good understanding of how to create diversity, support beneficial insects, and feed your soil life. And that's what companion planting is really all about. So just keep it simple. Mix plant families, add herbs and flowers, keep the soil covered and active, and think about the whole ecosystem, not just plant A and plant B. That's how you make companion planting work for you and not just become another gardening rule to stress over. So I hope today's episode gave you some clarity and confidence when it comes to companion planting, because it's truly not a magic formula in the garden. It's just a great tool when used thoughtfully. If you want to hear even more on this topic of companion planting, be sure to check out a recent replay of a YouTube live session I had because I answered a ton of great questions all about companion planting from real gardeners that were live in the session. And so it's packed with tons of great info I think you'll really enjoy. You can find that link in the description. And thank you so much for hanging out with me today. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean so much if you left a review or shared it with a gardening friend. I will see you in the next episode. And as always, happy gardening.